Magic Treehouse, Book Number 35, Camp Time in California. Written by Mary Pope Osborne. Chapter 9, The Last Grizzly. "Thank you, Governor," said President Teddy Roosevelt. "Ladies and gentlemen, I come to you having survived the backwoods. I have seen the true beauty of Yosemite, and I have had a bully good time." The crowd laughed and cheered. "I must thank world-famous naturalist and writer Mr. John Muir, or John of the Mountains, as many of us call him, for guiding me," said President Roosevelt. "And I thank two young artists, Jack and Annie. I promise I will save this wilderness for them, and for their children, and for their children's children, and for all the people of this great nation, rich and poor." The crowd cheered. "We must always preserve the birds and animals here, and, of course, the lives of our priceless giant trees," said Teddy. "We are not building this beautiful country for a day. We want America to last through the ages. And so today I announce that, as President of these great United States, I am placing all of Yosemite under National Park protection." The crowd roared. "Thank you for coming," the president said. "Enjoy your Sunday." Then, as the crowd kept cheering, the governor led Teddy into the hotel. Annie looked at Jack. Her face was shining. "We did it," Jack said. "We helped save the wilderness." Annie nodded. "By Sunday's noon hour," she said with a smile. "Jack! Annie!" someone called. They looked behind them. John of the Mountains was on his horse again. He rode over to them. "I want to thank you," he said. "My job was to guide President Roosevelt through Yosemite and convince him to put all of it, especially the big trees, under the protection of the National Park System. You helped me very much, and I'm grateful." "You're welcome," said Annie. "Will you join me in the hotel for lunch?" John asked. "Thanks, but we need to meet our art teacher now," said Annie. "We have to go back to the big trees where she left us." "She's picking us up there," said Jack. "I'm afraid the big trees are quite far from here," said John. "But while the president meets with the governor, I can lead you there, then return with the mules." Don't you want to go inside the hotel with the others?" said Annie. "No, actually, I always prefer to be outside rather than inside," said John. "Wait, I'll tell Charlie." As John told the ranger his plans, Jack turned to Annie. "How will we climb up to the treehouse if John's with us?" She shrugged. "I guess we'll just hang out with him till he leaves," she said. John rode back to them. Jack and Annie followed him on their mules. The three animals trotted away from the hotel grounds and started along the forest trail. John led the way over the long, bumpy, winding road. On their journey, they again rode through different kinds of weather. At first, the day was hot and sunny, but then clouds moved in. The wind blew, the air grew colder. A hard rain fell. Jack remembered Teddy's words. "I love wild weather," he shouted. Annie laughed. Suddenly the rain stopped, and warm sunlight returned. By the time they reached the grove of big trees, it was nearly twilight. Long shadows crossed the forest. "Here we are," said John. Not far away was the giant tree, with the magic treehouse high in its branches. Fortunately, the rope ladder was out of sight on the other side of its massive trunk. John got off his horse. and Jack and Annie jumped off their mules. Annie hugged hers. "Thanks, Petey," she whispered. "Good mule," Jack said to his. "Thanks for taking me everywhere." The animal flicked its long ears and snorted. As Jack walked away, Annie was still whispering to Petey. The mule seemed to be listening carefully to her. John looked puzzled. "Annie has a special way with animals," Jack explained. "She talks to them and listens to them and understands what they're feeling." "Wonderful," said John. "Any glimpse into the hidden life of an animal makes our own lives better in every way." "That's true," said Jack. He loved how John talked about nature. "Is your teacher coming in a buggy?" John asked. Yes," said Jack. "But you don't have to wait with us. You probably need to be somewhere else." John shook his head. "For me, the best place to be is wherever I am." Good attitude, thought Jack. But not good for us when we need to climb into the treehouse. "While we wait, I'll make a little fire to warm us up," said John. He quickly gathered kindling and branches, then lit a match. Soon Jack and Annie were sitting close to a crackling fire. John took a small bundle from one of the saddlebags. "A bite to eat before your journey home," he said. He handed them chunks of hard bread. As Jack crunched his snack, a breeze blew through the forest. The wind picked up. All the tall trees waved. Their leaves made swishing, whispery sounds. "I love these giant sequoia trees as much as I love people," said John. "Every leaf on every tree seems to sing. Can you hear them?" "Almost," whispered Annie. Jack only heard the swishing sounds. He didn't hear singing. "There's music in everything," said John. "Falling water, stones, stars. Human senses are not fine enough to hear nature's song." "I wish I could hear it," said Annie. "You will," said John. "Just keep listening." Jack looked around at the darkening forest, at the other giant trees, their leaves shaking in the wind. Suddenly, he nearly jumped out of his skin. "Grizzly!" he gasped. Chapter 10. Wind in the Trees. John and Annie whirled around to look. The shaggy brown bear was walking slowly toward the campfire. It stopped and stared at the three of them. "Be very still," John said softly to Jack and Annie. "Is it a grizzly?" whispered Jack. "She is indeed," said John. "You were right. I thought there were no grizzlies left in Yosemite. Perhaps she is the last one." "That's sad," said Annie. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" John said. "Can you sketch her for me?" "Yes," whispered Annie. She reached into her pocket and took out her sketchbook. Though he was scared of the bear, Jack did the same. The grizzly didn't move. She stood very still and kept gazing at the three of them. Jack's heart was pounding. By the firelight, he pressed his pencil against the white page. The pencil started moving. Soon Jack had sketched the outline of the bear. He then drew clumps of shaggy fur and big paws and claws. He darkened the bear's nose and ears. By the time he finished his sketch, Jack wasn't afraid of the grizzly anymore. The bear was beautiful, just as John had said. The grizzly huffed and shook her large head. She directed her gaze at Annie and stared at her. "Okay, I'll tell them," Annie said to the bear. The bear huffed again. Then she turned and lumbered back the way she had come. "Tell us what?" John asked Annie. "Yes, what?" said Jack, eager to hear. She wants us to know that she didn't mean us any harm yesterday, said Annie. She believes all living things have a right to exist. Because she's the last grizzly bear in Yosemite, she's moving on. She's going to find a place where she's not around people, so she won't scare them anymore. A place where she can be her true self and be... Wait, stop, said Jack. With other grizzly bears, finished Annie. She didn't say all that, said Jack. Annie grinned. Trust me, she said. John of the Mountains laughed. I trust you, Annie, he said. And the bear. Then he looked around. Friends, it's nearly dark. I think you'd better return to the hotel with me. Oh, wow, I hear her, said Annie, jumping up. She stared at the forest. I hear her calling us. Who, the bear? Said Jack. No, Morgan, our teacher. She's here. I just heard her call out our names from beyond the trees. Annie shouted at the woods. Hold on, Morgan, we're coming. Stay there. Oh, right, said Jack. He jumped up. Our ride home is here, calling to us from beyond the trees. I didn't hear anyone, said John. Really? Said Annie. Yes, but to be honest, I don't hear people as well as I hear nature, said John. I will wait here by the fire a while. If you don't find your teacher, promise me you will come right back. We will, thank you, said Jack. Thank you for everything, for bringing us back here and for the great camping trip. We'll never forget you, John, said Annie. Please take our sketchbooks as a gift and say goodbye to President Teddy for us. Jack and Annie handed their sketchbooks to John of the Mountains. Thank you, friends. I will treasure these, he said. Have a good trip home. You too, John. Bye, said Annie. Then she called toward the giant trees. Coming, Morgan. She grabbed Jack's hand and pulled him deeper into the forest. There, said Jack. He and Annie ran to the rope ladder hanging on the other side of the giant tree. Annie started up. Jack followed. They climbed through the dark, step by step, until finally they reached the top of the sequoia. By the time they slipped inside the treehouse, the sky was filled with stars. The leaves of all the big trees were shaking. Far below, they could barely see the glow of John's campfire. Goodbye, John of the Mountains. Goodbye, California, Annie said softly. Goodbye, President Teddy and Mules and last grizzly bear. And while Annie kept saying her goodbyes, Jack started to hear a humming sound. The sound seemed to be coming from the wind-blown trees. Annie, listen, said Jack. Goodbye, Douglas Squirtle, Alpine Butterfly, said Annie. Waterfall and stars. Annie, listen, said Jack. Annie stopped talking and listened to the rustling leaves of the giant trees. More and more sounds filled the evening air. The strange whirring voices of all the living things of Yosemite. The wind stirred the voices together, blending them into one timeless, wordless song. The song grew louder and louder until it was nearly deafening. Then suddenly it softened, died down, and stopped. What was that? Jack said with wonder. He'd never heard anything like it. Nature's song, said Annie. The song that John hears. Oh, whoa, breathed Jack. After a long moment of silence, Annie sighed. Time to go, she said. Jack couldn't speak. Annie grabbed the Pennsylvania book. She found the picture of a Frog Creek. I wish we could go there. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. The Frog Creek woods were quiet. It was early evening. No time at all had passed in Frog Creek while Jack and Annie were gone. "We're wearing our own clothes again," said Annie. She felt in the pockets of her hoodie. "Darn, no more magic pencils." Jack smiled. "Yeah, I love drawing with them." "Me too," said Annie. "Sketching nature helped me pay attention and see things better." "Definitely," said Jack. "Maybe I'll take some art classes at the Y." He sighed. That trip was... He was at a loss for words. "Perfect," said Annie. "Perfect," agreed Jack. "We'd better go," said Annie. "We've used up half of our 14 minutes. "Right," said Jack. He followed Annie down the rope ladder. They stepped onto the ground and started for home. As they walked through the evening chill, the Frog Creek woods seemed as familiar as ever. Yet somehow the woods felt different too, more mysterious and more alive, Jack thought. In the dark, he heard things he usually didn't notice. The whispering of unnamed trees, the scampering of unknown creatures, the calls of unseen birds. "I'd like to get binoculars like Teddy's," he said, "to study birds." "How about a magnifying glass like John's," said Annie, "to study rocks?" "Yep, and a telescope to help learn about stars," said Jack. "And a guidebook about trees," said Annie, "and a sketchbook for drawing them." "Definitely," said Jack. "I'd like to learn bird calls too." "I can teach you some," said Annie. "Thanks. I could teach you what I know about stars," said Jack. "Perfect," said Annie. Jack and Annie quickened their steps and bounded out of the Frog Creek woods. High in the purple sky, the first star of the night shone above them as they ran for home.